How are you? As all good artists do, I have a sketchbook. I have multiple sketchbooks. I've only finished 3 to completion because I have a terrible tendency to just go halfway through all my other sketchbooks and never touch them again, but that's a story for another time. I drew a lot in school, probably more than I should have. Actually, no, you know what? I didn't draw enough. And starting in high school, I carried a sketchbook in my backpack so I could have something to draw in when I had a free moment to do so. So this is one of my oldest sketchbooks. As you can see, she's seen better days. I used this sketchbook from November 2011 to early 2014. Even though I consider this sketchbook completed, the last page is blank. I've been going back and forth on whether to make it 200% official and add one last illustration, or if I should just leave it blank. I think it would be nice having a contrast between the first page and the last page as a sign of progress in my art journey, but I also think some things are better left in the past. Either way, I am here to do my first sketchbook tour, with a twist. This has been on the itinerary for a while now, but I am not ready for the cringe that's about to ensue. I had a very interesting imagination as a child. And by that, I mean I didn't have an original bone in my body at the time, meaning I just ripped off of stuff I thought looked cool and said, "Wow, I'm so original, lol, roar XD." I'm having a moment. Now, there is a difference between taking inspiration from something and just ripping it off entirely. And to be fair to myself, there are far more egregious examples of this in my other earlier sketchbooks than what you're going to see here. But there are some bits here that are still kinda sus. Now, I will also disclaim that I did not script the flip-through part of the video, even though I probably should have. But to be honest, I'm really not sure how you would go about scripting a sketchbook tour, so I'm just gonna wing it. At the expense of having a clear train of thought. If I start to draw blanks every 10 seconds, you know why. But anyhow, if you're interested in seeing me reopen Pandora's box or something like that, then stick around and I will do my best to provide. And if you're new here and you want to see this and other art-related videos and shenanigans from me, then make sure to like and subscribe. We have spaghetti! Anyway, here we go. Oh god. We are off to a great start. How do I explain this? There's quite a bit of context here. So I'm sure most of you have seen Avatar: The Last Airbender and its sequel spin-off series, The Legend of Korra. If you haven't, I'd suggest giving it a try. I think both shows are on Netflix and if you're in the US. But anyway. In the months leading up to The Legend of Korra's premiere, there was this promotional artwork that came out of, if I remember correctly, it was Korra, Mako, and Bolin in the pro bending arena about to throw hands. Let's just say I got a burst of inspiration looking at that, and this illustration was born. Of course, I did change the poses around a bit because I'm not sure if my talent just wasn't at a similar level to the original artwork that inspired this. What am I saying? Of course it wasn't. Or maybe I just had some semblance of common sense. Even for someone who wasn't very known for being original at the time. But I don't know, I lost my train of thought already, that's great. Why are his arms like that? Hold on, let me just... You're gonna be seeing this problem with the hands quite a bit. I had this problem where I just... Let's be real here, hands are a pain in the butt. And I knew this. So everybody just got oven mitt hands. Also, I am just loving the way I drew this stadium arena thing. Let's just get a closer look at that. Most of the stuff in this sketchbook was done in pencil. There's only like a handful of colored artworks in here. There is a sketchbook that I used in my first year of college that has a lot more colored illustrations, but that's besides the point. And I believe it's time to move on to the next monstrosity. This was a reference sheet for one of the villains from a childhood project of mine that I spent 6 years working on, only to just completely abandon. I know, it sounds tragic, but let's be real here, it was probably for the best. You'll be seeing a lot of illustrations in here related to that project because that story concept had a chokehold on all of my brain cells for like 6 years, and it was especially... How do I word this? Okay, we're starting off 2012 strong with one of my several attempts at comic pages that I made in this sketchbook. As you can see, it easily rivals Michelangelo or something. Just kidding. Now, under most circumstances, I would never roast a 14-year-old's artwork, but this is my artwork, and I'm going to roast it to oblivion. I believe this was supposed to be some sort of monster machine thing, but as you can see, good concept, terrible execution was the norm here, and would be for a good few years. Especially with the facial expressions, like, good grief. This one was supposed to be a shocked expression, same with this one. Also, you gotta love the white room syndrome thing going on here. Here's another illustration from the project that I was talking about. You have all the protagonists over here, and all the villains over here. This was just one of many illustrations that I started, but completely lost the motivation and energy to finish. Which is a shame, because you could argue that I was starting off strong. They all look so deadpan, like... They're just like, gosh, do we really have to fight the bad guys again? Well, I mean, except for her. Also, the main villain is just over here, like, smug. Wow, would you look at that? It's another unfinished illustration. Why are her arms like that? Also, where is the rest of this woman's body? Does she just come out of... Actually, no, let's not think about that. I think the most glaring issue of my artwork, among many, many other things, was that I made the mistake of unironically thinking reference was cheating until I went off to college. So this resulted in noodle arms like these. There are many other anatomical mistakes you'll be seeing over the course of the sketchbook tour, but here's the first big one. Oh, look, something that's actually kind of decent in here. I don't know, the lighting is kind of nice. Maybe I should adjust the light so we can see this better. Is that good? Anyway. I mean, I wasn't very good at lighting at the time, and come to think of it, I wasn't very good at much with drawing at all. But I don't know, I wanted to attempt some sort of lighting, which was pretty rare for me at the time. I'm not sure why I made the decision to have her sword just be floating like this. Oh, by the way, this is the main character of the project that I was talking about earlier. You'll be seeing a lot more artwork of her over the course of the sketchbook tour, and also all the other main characters as well. Here are some little doodles of some of the characters from that same project. Here's the main character again. I think these two were the villains. She was more of a side character than he was. I think I was attempting some sort of hairstyle with this guy, but I didn't keep it. Also, why is the side view like that? I'm not even sure if you would call these turnarounds, but I believe these were reference attempts at some of the characters' hairstyles. These two were two of the major villains in the story. Again, I didn't keep this hairstyle. I don't remember how long I played around with it for, but I kept this hairstyle for this character in particular because I thought that one actually came out nice. At least it was a good idea at the time. So this was one of the few times I attempted to draw a building. I believe this was supposed to be the place where the villains of my story resided. Why does it vaguely look like Las Noches from Bleach? God help me. Also, I don't remember who this is, but nail game strong, I guess. Some more doodles again. The same side character from earlier. Oh, I think I forgot to mention, these two were actually siblings. She was the younger sister, and this guy was the older brother. I did play around with both of their designs a bit, but I think the general concept for this character mostly stayed the same. Also, I'm not gonna lie, this doodle is actually kinda decent. So here's another illustration for that same story. The story was actually split into two parts, so the second half took place after a 2 or 3 year time skip, so everybody's designs are different. I'm not sure what she's doing here, because she was really nothing more than a sidekick, and wasn't really a main part of the main group of protagonists. But I guess I thought at the time it would be nice to just include her in here. So I may as well mention everybody's names, since again, you'll be seeing a lot more of them. This is the main character, Terra. This is Arietta, Terra's bestie. Terra's older sister, Rika, Yuzu, Shika, Mila, Reika, and Ayame. And this was also their animal companion thing. I still think the composition of this piece is somewhat interesting. Like, I feel like the shots of everyone could be varied instead of being bust shots, because let's be real here. So if I do decide to redraw this, which I have actually attempted before but never got around to finishing, but if I do it again, I'm definitely gonna try and change up the compositions of all of this mess. Maybe I shouldn't say mess, because I do still kind of like it in a way. We've got more of these guys again, as you can see. Come to think of it, this design isn't actually so bad. And now we have a very lackluster attempt at a fight scene. What are these poses? And come to think of it, where are their faces? Oh, I think I just burped. That's hot. So among many things, you've got the tree. I've said this before and I will say it again. Reference is your bestie. Again, the noodle arms, the noodle legs. What even are the... What? How would the sword even work? I have so many questions. Like, help. I'm gonna be very honest with you, I don't remember who this is. Honestly, I might have just sketched some random girl and called it a day. Why is her hair like that? Also, you just gotta love how the eyes are the only thing in this entire drawing with any form of rendering. That's great, I love that for me. Here's some more Arietta. She got a couple of name changes over the years, but for the sake of simplicity, I will be calling her Arietta in this video. This one's also kinda decent. The blank background was a choice, and again, the eyes being the only thing that's rendered here. Adjusting the light again so we can all see this better. This was the main character for a very short-lived fantasy project of mine. Basically, it was about her kingdom getting destroyed, and I'm not sure if it was some sort of revenge quest or... I'm drawing a blank again. Like, I do not remember most of this stuff. I think it may have been a rehash of another very early childhood project of mine that I made it all the way to the last chapter and then I abandoned it. So that should tell you something about my completion rate with all my creative projects at the time. I mean, unless they were for school or something, in which case I had to finish them, but you get what I mean. This one! I remember being so proud of this one. Again, why are her arms like that? One of the very few colored drawings in the sketchbook, of course. Not sure if I would redraw this, to be honest. I might, but... I don't know, actually. These were some more doodles for a character for a science fiction project that I had going on. This one wasn't very long-lived either. I think it only lasted for about a year or so before I just abandoned it. But it had, like, androids and machinery and all that other stuff. That much I remember. I think this girl's name was... Actually, yeah, it was Echo, but that's neither here nor there. Another unfinished illustration. You will be seeing a lot of these. Where are their mouths? I lost the energy before I drew the third person. Oh look, it's another character of mine falling over. Also, these were all several attempts at drawing different eye shapes and styles. I think I wanted to fill the whole page with these, but I just stopped at number 7. The rest of these are just doodles, as you can see, and a very poor attempt at a shocked expression. Speaking of poor attempts at facial expressions, look at just look at this. Look at his face. This one is better, but not by much. So yeah, just another attempt at a comic page. This marks one of the few times I drew in pen in this sketchbook. I think I have some idea of who these characters are. Might have been for that science fiction story that I mentioned earlier, but... Anyway, there were supposed to be multiple characters here, but... Again, lost the motivation to finish. Some more doodles. Another poor attempt at a side view. I still want to work on improving my profile views, because honestly, they're not as up to scratch as I want them to be. Also, honestly, this eye is one of the few times I actually drew something decent in this sketchbook. I'm just gonna be very honest. Here's some more of Arietta, and some also rather decent illustrations for, at least for what I could cook up at the time. This shocked expression is actually pretty good. Not gonna lie. There was something that inspired these doodles, but I'm not 100% sure where it came from. This was the main character for another very short-lived story, and also one of the few times I gave my characters animal traits, at least at the time. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I ramped that up a lot with the current webcomic that I'm working on, The Reverent Silence. There is kind of a reason as to why I did that. Like, if you watch the introduction video for my webcomic, you'll know that I tried to give everyone human features, but it just wasn't cutting it for me. I don't know, it's complicated. Is she supposed to be a wolf or a squirrel? Anyway, shout out to when I made it to episode 11 of Madoka and then stopped watching. Low-key, I need to finish watching that show, because the fact that I made it so close to the end and then stopped is a crime. But all of that aside, I remember liking the art style of that show a lot, and I was gonna say I tried taking some inspiration from it, and this was my kind of sort of main art style for a couple months. I'm not sure whether to call this inspiration, to be honest. These are some backshots of all of the villains of the main story that I was working on. For the sake of simplicity, and just so I don't call it the story or whatever, it was called 26, a title that I later gave to another project of mine, which I named 26 Days. That one didn't last very long. But anyway, I would often take inspiration from other people's art that I saw on the internet and then apply what I saw to whatever I would put in my sketchbook. But the thing is, usually around the time that I was using the sketchbook, it wasn't so much being inspired by it as it was borderline ripping off everything I saw. I mean, what can I say? I wasn't really getting what I said I didn't have an original bone in my body. Okay, so this thing. This was some concept art for a quote-unquote ascended form of my character Terra, but it never went anywhere, as most of my concepts did. The wings actually look pretty good though, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not really sure who this is. Again, where's her mouth? Honestly, with the way she's standing, she was probably meant to have someone standing next to her. But I think you can probably guess what happened. Here are some more doodles, another little pen sketch here. So 26 got a hard reboot in 2012, a couple of years before I decided to abandon the project completely. I changed the backstories of most of the main cast, including the main character Terra, and I also changed up everybody's designs. Tara's was probably the most dramatic redesign of the entire main cast. I remember giving her some sort of tragic backstory that I thought was comparable to Batman or something, so I had the brilliant idea of giving her the Batman mask. I was a very unhinged child. There is another drawing further in the sketchbook similar to this, but here you go. Yes, seriously. Again, I don't remember who she is. The design's kind of decent, though. I'm pretty sure this was one of the early designs I went with for Arietta after I did the hard reboot of 26. I didn't keep this design, and I gave her something that suited her character, personality, whatever, a little more accurately than this. I'm not sure if this was meant to be the concept for some sort of cover or chapter illustration, because I used to do quite a few of those, but whatever the case may be, I just drew her and called it a day. Here's Tara again. This was actually the base sketch I used to do the quote-unquote cover artwork for the first volume of the rebooted version of 26. I'm gonna be honest, I'm pretty sure I lost that file, but I do remember drawing this in the sketchbook and then scanning it and going over it and coloring it in Paint.net, which was my program of choice at the time. The final result was okay. I remember it being okay, but I think if I were to look at it now, it would just be a nightmare to look at. This was meant to be the first page of the story itself, as in, like, the first page of the first chapter. I remember being decently proud of this one, but looking back at it now, it could be a little bit better. So we have Tara waking up from a nightmare, and then she has to go and get ready for... Is it right to say her job? Anyway, for context, all of the main characters were part of this organization that had to save the world from alien-like beings from another dimension. It does go into a bit more detail than that, but that's just the very basic gist of it. So Tara's just like, this again, and then she gets woken up by her alarm clock. I promise this is supposed to be an alarm clock. I looked back at this and I thought it was a box the first time, but no. Again, more mid-range bust shots. It's kind of embarrassing how many of these I did. And then we have her putting on her work clothes, and I believe this is the last page that I drew. Shot variation is decent, but as I said, it could use a little bit of work. I mean, I don't know, it looks kind of okay for the intended mood of this scene in particular, so 7.5 out of 10, I guess. Here is the first of several reference sheets that I did for the main cast of the rebooted version of 26, starting with Tara. She did get several name changes along with Arietta, but again, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to call her Tara here. Also, let's appreciate that I wrote super awesome hat. To be fair, the hat's kinda nice. I did play around with everyone's designs a lot, because you kinda have to work at a character's design until you're satisfied with the one that you currently have before you can call it the final product. I don't know, hopefully I'm making sense here. Here we have Arietta. As you can see, her name is Asami here. That was one of her other names. I think this was the design I went with for a time. Ignore this very unfinished doodle. So we have her from the front and the back as well. Yeah, really. Here we have Rika, who, like I said, was Tara's older sister. Slightly improving with the profile view. This is the reference sheet for Mila, and unfortunately I did not have the energy to draw her face. Looking back, some of these designs were kinda decent. I do have plans to redraw the main cast of 26, so I'll see what I can take from these original designs and apply to their redesigns. Stay tuned for that one. Now, this one requires a whole backstory, because there is a whole backstory behind this. So in my first year of high school, we had this science project where we had to build, like, a miniature building with I am still having a moment, clearly. In my first year of high school, we had this science project where we had to construct a miniature building from cardboard and toothpicks and things like that. I remember our group doing decently well in the project, but there was this other group that made a very tubular building called the Beef Train. It's still funny. The beef train, unfortunately, did not do very well in the final assignment, where the building had to survive a mock earthquake simulation. But nevertheless, a legend was born, and it became a running gag in our class for the rest of the year. So here we have one of the main villains, Gray. If you've been following me since April of last year, that name might sound familiar to you. Anyway, he's having the time of his life on top of a train, as you can see. This guy was kind of an unhinged menace at the time, so honestly, this kind of suits him. He would do this. So we've got more doodles of IMA here. Another improvement in profile view, but actually, come to think of it, this is a huge step up from what was in the first pages of the sketchbook. So I did some work on the first chapter of the rebooted version of 26, and this was the first page that I ultimately went with. As with one of the earlier drawings of Terra, I did sketch here, then I scanned it, and then finished it up in paint.net. I think I made it through the first chapter in its entirety, and then I just stopped completely. I think I actually do have the file of this somewhere. I'll put it up on the screen if I do find it, but yeah. So this was the full reference sheet for IMA. Another profile view. Not as good as the other one, to be honest. This was supposed to be a concept illustration for one of the earlier chapters of 26 after the first major fight of the story. Arietta and this one other guy are bickering, and Terra is just looking on completely confused. I was gonna say this looks vaguely like a test tube, but I'm not even sure if that's the right thing to say. Gotta love the design of this teleporter machine, though. This was the reference sheet for Yuzu, another one of the main protagonists. She is supposed to have a face, I promise. Here we have Terra, here we have Rika. I have no idea who these two are supposed to be. Oh boy, this drawing. I will confess, I have not made it very far into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure at all, but the concept of the stands had a chokehold on me for like a year. So that resulted in me getting a burst of inspiration for this artwork, and it was for a story concept I had where this girl was the main character and she had this sort of guardian thing. Even though these guys were fundamentally similar to the stands, they were intended to go in a very different direction, and I remember giving this girl some friends too. And here we've got her home slices. So we've got this guy, and we also have her. Unfortunately, I forget what the plot was supposed to be. That is how undeveloped it was. Okay, now we're going into 2013, and I have no idea why I drew myself getting chased by Nyan Cat. This is chaos. So, in the organization that all the main characters of 26 were a part of, they all had different ranks depending on their strength and skill and years of experience and whatnot. So, you had Terra, who was number 13, Arietta, who was number 26, Rika was number 8, Mila was number 17, IMA was number 19, and Yuzu was number 11. I'm not sure if I ever gave a rank to Reika, or if I just put her in another dimension entirely. But here are almost all of the main characters lined up. And then we have this character. This was the main character of a sci-fi project called The Journey of Saya, where she had to stop the world from dark forces that were taking over. One of the main characters, she's not pictured here, but she actually influenced the design and overall existence, whatever, of Talia from The Reverent Silence, and they actually have the same name. I talk about this in the video where I introduce Talia along with one of the other villains, so if you want to see that, I'll link it down in the description. Here we go. There really is not enough mayonnaise. This is probably one of the better comic pages in this sketchbook. I mean, again, despite the lack of shot variation. I was pretty proud of this one when I first drew it. So this is supposed to be an interaction between Arietta and one of the main villains, and Arietta is about to receive a revelation. Oh my god, I can't talk. Arietta is about to receive a revelation that will change her entire life, and not in the fun way. You gotta love some angst. Am I right? Another group illustration. I did keep the time skip from the original version of the story and took it into the reboot, so I believe this is everybody after the time skip. We got Tara, Arietta, another Arietta, it's complicated, and some of the other side characters and some of the main villains who were supposed to go through some sort of redemption arc and join the good guys. I never really fully expanded on that because I never got to that part of the story, unfortunately. Honestly, same. Here we've got Gray with his sunglasses and Tara giving him a reality check. What is she reacting to? Wrong answers only. And here we've got Yuzu and Mila looking like they've seen something particularly heinous. And we've got this, I guess. These were some side characters also for 26. I would call them main characters, but it requires getting into a lot of the lore regarding the existence of 26 itself. And it gets very complicated. Where are her legs? Like, where are the rest of her legs? Where are the rest of his legs? Here's another drawing of Saya with who I believe, or what I believe is the very first drawing of Talia. Her design did change a little later on. I was happier with this one than I was with the other one. Some more of Arietta and Tara and whoever this lady is. This was supposed to be another group shot, but I think you can guess what happened. And now, the second Batman Tara drawing. They said I could be anything, so I became Batman. I'm pretty sure I did this during one of my Spanish classes where I had some free time at the end. I mean, what can I say? The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma. This character was supposed to be one of the side characters, who was one of the higher ranking members of the organization that the main characters were a part of in 26. I forget who she is. I kind of like this design, to be honest. Alright, so we've got the last 2 pages where I drew anything in those pages. These are just some doodles of some characters that I don't really remember. I think this was like early 2014. And we've got this. And that is pretty much the end of the sketchbook. I think these two, well, what am I saying? These two are supposed to be walking away from something, but I'm not entirely sure what. But yeah. The last page is, well, the last 2 pages are blank, as you can see. Again, I'm not entirely sure what to do with this. Like, do I just leave it, or just put something in here to make it a little more official? I'm not sure. But either way... let's redraw this work of art, shall we? Hello, everybody who's ready to see me redraw some old artwork with the power of my funny pencil grip and also struggle with the camera placements like 5 times. Yes, that actually happened, unfortunately. Anyway, while I'm setting everything up, let's talk about the lore behind 26 for a bit, because as you could probably tell during the Sketchbook Tour, that project had a chokehold on me for like 6 years. I have a video planned where I talk about the story in more detail, so let's just stick to the basics for now. 26 was a story about a group of high school students who had to save the world from alien-like beings from another dimension. The sequence of the story at the beginning, and also much of the major plot points, were just an amalgamation of rip-offs from things that I liked, though it took on some semblance of originality later on. And it was also one of the most ambitious things I've ever worked on, and come to think of it, I might have just abandoned it because the scope of the project became way too big. At one point, the story had 10 planned seasons, and 14-year-old me unironically thought she could take on such a big project. Yeah, that was the problem. I always bit off more than I could chew. Is that the right thing to say here? Anyway. There were also a couple of spin-offs that I started but never got around to finishing, and the characters from the first drawing in my old sketchbook were from one of those spin-offs. I think it took place in the far future after the main story of 26 featuring the descendants of the original main cast. Yes, I planned that far ahead, as I had a tendency to do. I think there was also some sort of time travel aspect, unless I have that confused with another spin-off idea that I had. Anyway, enough of the project lore because that's not really why we're here. It's time to get into the process of how I redrew the first artwork in the sketchbook. So, even though the pro bending arena was not in the background of the promotional artwork for The Legend of Korra that inspired this piece, as I found out after looking at it again, or was there another promotional artwork from the same show that I took inspiration from too? Either way, man, I feel dumb. The pro bending aspect of the show's first season, at least from what I remember, did influence this piece in some way. So while in the end the artwork that I drew was more the result of inspiration as opposed to being a ripoff, I still wasn't very comfortable with keeping the original composition. And let's be real here, there wasn't much to look at to begin with. So for the redraw, I changed the composition of the piece entirely and turned it into something a lot more dynamic. The original piece was done in pencil and black and white shading, and come to think of it, I really only saved any full-on coloring for my digital artworks at the time. I knew for the remake I wanted to color it in, so I whipped out a set of colored pencils from Peter Popper Press that I had recently gotten. Please sponsor me. So let's briefly get to the characters. The names I had for these guys range from somewhat unassuming to just straight up lifted from Google Translate. The girl's name was Mikage. I might have borrowed that from somewhere, but I forgot where. The dude in the center was Hinode. I had forgotten what I had typed into Google Translate to get that name until I got to writing the script for this part of the video, and after some fiddling around, I learned that I had apparently typed sunrise and had that translated into Japanese. But, as I'm sure we all know, Google Translate is a bit questionable when it comes to reliability. But, as I was saying, the guy in the center was Hinode, and the white-haired guy was IJzer, which is, I believe, the Dutch word for iron. I don't really remember why I chose that word specifically for his name, but I think I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I can't think of anything better, so let's just roll with it for now. I promise I am a sane and normal person, but I can't say the same for 14-year-old me, unfortunately. I want to give them all new names, at least for the sake of this video, and also because I might revisit them again in the future, so I figured I might as well spare myself from any future headaches. So Hinode is now Josue, Mikage is now Amalia, and IJzer is now Levin, and I'll be referring to everyone by their new names from this point on, so just a heads up. I also changed up their hairstyles and the way I drew their faces because the same face syndrome in the old drawing was particularly strong, and that was something that I struggled with for much of my life. Even though I drew the original drawing in black and white, there was still a part of me that remembered what their hair and eye colors and their respective elemental abilities were supposed to be, as that was the foundation of the magic system in 26, so I went off of that as a sort of springboard. Sometime into the sketching process, I had to bring out a book stand that I sometimes use as an easel to actually see what I was doing, and also to make things easier because I found myself struggling. Which does happen sometimes, but this time it was throwing me way off. I used some poses that I found online as reference, modifying them just a bit for the drawing. I didn't want the background to be blank, so I filled some of the remaining space with smoke and some globs of lava, which are Josue and Amalia's elements respectively. I'll get to that when I talk about the coloring phase. For the line art, I used my trustworthy set of Winsor & Newton pigment liners, using the thicker liners for most of the line art itself and the thinner lines for the finer details. I wasn't very happy with the lines at first since they came out shakier than I wanted them, but I was able to fix the issue in the end by making some of the lines thicker to make up for it, namely the lines around each individual character. Also, I made sure to pay very close attention to where I was putting the ink down, because my hands tend to move faster than my brain, and before I know it, I've gone over the wrong lines. But I didn't have that problem here, fortunately, so all was well. I knew going into the redraw that I wanted to use colored pencils, so again I grabbed my new set of colored pencils and got to work. I did swatches of all 72 colors the night before in the sketchbook that I'm currently using, and I have to say, despite my initial apprehension, I was very impressed with how much pigmentation I got out of not just the swatches, but the colors I put down on the drawing itself. Even though I kept everyone's hair in eye color, I did play around with both Josue and Amalia's hair colors, adding some red to Amalia's hair to match her element, and adding a single blonde strand in Josue's hair, although you can't really see it. Oops! Also, Josue's hair was originally a darker shade of brown, but I don't know, I kinda like the golden brown hair for him. The colors I used for everyone's design are in some way a reflection of their elements. Levin could control ice, Amalia originally could control fire, I think, but I changed it to lava for the redraw. I don't remember what Josue's element was, but his eyes being silver gave me the idea to have his new element be smoke. Since Arietta, who was in the same universe, could control ice, I think that if I ever expand on these three as characters, I might just change Levin's power a tiny bit, as I did with the other two, and have him be able to summon cold fronts, or cause a sudden drop in temperature, or anything that just has to do with the cold in general. If I revisit 26, I would want to keep the elemental magic system, but I don't want two people having the exact same element. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. When I made the original drawing in 2011, everyone in the main cast of 26 had a uniform with a very dark green as the base color, and a secondary color that reflected their respective element. For example, teal for wind, red for fire, and green for lightning. Matching the color exactly was a bit of a struggle. Usually with colored pencils you have to layer different colors to get the color you want, and I didn't really get the exact match for the color I had in my head. But I made do with what I had. And I kinda like that everyone has a slightly different shade of green as the base color for their outfits. To get the dark green that I ended up with, I started with a light shade of green, followed by an olive green, then a dark green, then dark gray, and then black. The process was similar for just about every aspect of the coloring process. I started with a light color and then moved on to darker colors to build up more vibrance. Vibrancy? Hell, my brain is fried. For any gradients that I needed, like the one in Amalia's hair, I started with the lightest color first before layering on the darker colors, stopping where I wanted to have the lighter colors show through. I also mapped out the hair highlights with a darker colored pencil so I wouldn't go over them by accident, which tends to happen to me when I do traditional drawings. I also wanted to give that glowing ice orb thing that Levin is wielding a glow effect, so I decided to experiment by starting out with a light blue color in places like his hands before going in with all the other colors that I needed. I also tried adding light blue highlights in places that I had already colored in to try and balance everything out. For the smoke, I used 2 different shades of gray and used a gradient effect, and for the lava, I looked up some reference to make sure I could get its texture at least somewhat correct. I started with yellow and then worked my way up to orange and red while still letting the yellow show through in certain places. I didn't want to just have a white background and call it a day, so to give the drawing that finished look, I decided to block in the background with a color that would make everyone stand out. Despite the fact that all of the characters have different color schemes, I wanted to have a color to tie everything together, and that color was purple. It was a bit of a last-minute decision, but as I started shading, I realized, wait, I have an idea. So aside from using it for the shading, and also in several other places, I colored in the background with this one lavender-looking color, and then outlined the characters with a darker shade of purple. And then I added my signature to finish everything off. Colored pencils have never been my forte, and this was a very trust the process sort of piece, and I initially had my doubts that it would turn out the way I wanted it to. But I think the finished piece turned out nice, and it's always really cool to see the difference between your old art and your new art. Although the new piece is definitely an improvement on the old one. But anyhow, that is the finished artwork. What do you think about the redraw? Let me know what you think in the comments, but as always, please keep things respectful and civil or I will eat your kneecaps. Okay, no, I'm joking. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. If you like this video and you want to see more from me, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a rock emoji in the comments if you made it this far. Also, if you're interested, make sure to check out my other social media accounts in the description, and if you want to support me further, my Ko-fi and my Etsy shop are also in the description. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Why is finding the perfect angle so hard? It should not be this difficult, but here we are, I guess.